Celtics Reddit podcast.
Marcus Smart is so good. Tatum, Brown, got it. Shot three.
Hello and welcome to the Celtics Reddit podcast. My name is Ben Vallis. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're doing well. Today we're joined by Steve Bulpett, longtime NBA and Celtics reporter, most recently for the Boston Herald. Steve was awesome to talk to and ended up giving us about an hour of his time. So without any further delay, here's our chat with Steve Bulpett. All right, folks, we're here with Joe, our New Zealand correspondent, and we're very excited to welcome longtime Celtics and NBA journalist Steve Bulpett. Steve, welcome, sir. How's things?
Living the dream.
Great. Good to hear it. And we're very appreciative of you coming on the podcast. So look, let's just get straight into it here. Through your breadth of experience, over 35 years on the job, we're hoping that to start with, you can help us just make sense of this season. Like, what's your take on why this season has been so disappointing thus far?
I think that, certainly and realistically, the injuries, the COVID situation, the contact tracing absences, all those things have factored into it, and they really shouldn't be diminished in any way to explain the mess that you've seen or the inconsistencies that you've seen. But seriously, I think that a lot of the problem that this team that's been dogging this team all year has been evident the last few years. They've gotten knocked out of the playoffs because at critical times they'll go away from their ball movement and start to play hero ball. And that's not even always a matter of guys being bad. It's guys trying to take responsibility onto themselves, saying, okay, we need a playmate. I'll go do this. I'll take responsibility, which is very gallant, but it takes the team away from what it's doing. So, when you go back a few years when the Celtics lost to Cleveland in Game 7 at home, that was a game the Celtics should have won. Cleveland was begging to die. And trust me, I can tell you this from talking to people involved. The Warriors were very happy that they got to face Cleveland instead of the Celtics. But anyway, so that knocks them out then. They go the next year and, the thing happens in Kyrie, the series against Milwaukee, they sweep the Pacers. They smoke Milwaukee in the first game, and then it just goes away. Things get difficult, and guys try to take it on themselves when it's like, do either of you guys play golf?
Yep. Not well, but yes.
Well, so one of the reasons why people don't play well is when things go bad, they try harder and they swing harder, and that's wrong. You can still got to play hard on defense, but you've got to play within the team basketball wise to make things work. You've got to play smarter, and they don't do that. And that has been an issue this year a lot. But in the recent stretch before that 3-game losing streak, when they were playing their best ball of the year, you saw them playing faster, much more up tempo, guys, running to get up on the break. And if not the break available, you would get into your secondary, playing harder defense. So it's there for them, but it's a matter of whether they're going to realize it in time to steer out of their skid.
What? I mean, I don't want to. Ben has a run sheet. He's very organised, Stephen. He's fantastic like that.
Joe likes to go rogue.
So hopefully I don't go too rogue on you. But like what we see, right? Like this isn't our first time kind of with the principal members of this team, and like just going forward. What is your reason for optimism or pessimism? Perhaps on the other hand, for optimism for them to change and learn and break these habits when the games really matter, or are you a little pessimistic? Because I've got a theory I want to try out with you.
Well, the reason for optimism is that they have it within them. I mean, none of us are going to be have the capability of winning a Grammy Award in the next year. but they have the capability of playing good basketball, playing really good basketball. So, if they can get healthy, if things get together at the right time, and, and that includes someone like Evan Fournier, who is just in a terrible situation now. He shouldn't even be playing, but he's out there trying to play so he can get reps, but he's not ready to play basketball. He had a rough bout with COVID. So that would be the optimism, is that it's within them.
Right.
But you have to go by what you see, and to think that, to feel any measure of confidence that what's in them is going to be on display, the recent history certainly just doesn't back that up.
No, it doesn't. I guess the reason I have a theory, and this is, I call it the Gordon Hayward theory. And I look at it like this. I was like, if Hayward really, really, really thought that the Celtics were just knocking on the door of a championship, I just don't think he would have left. To me, he looked at it like, Charlotte, Boston, Indiana, not much of a material difference in my chances of winning a championship. So I might as well go and actually be a number 2 guy or something like that. That's my theory. So, and the reason I say that is he's sort of making an assessment of, at least at this point in time, the ability of Tatum and Brown to drive winning. Is that, obviously I'm imagining Gordon Hayward's thinking there, and it's not necessarily true at all. But I just wonder how that sounds to you. Does that pass the sniff test, or where would you poke some holes in it?
Well, the part about Indiana, Charlotte, and Boston being in a similar mix, I don't buy that part at all. Those other two teams don't have the type of talent that Boston has. It's not there. Gordon got put in a strange situation, and I've written about this a few times. He signs with the team, and he's ready. He signs up. He's going to be the counterpoint scorer to Isaiah Thomas, and he signs in July of that year. Before he even gets to training camp, Isaiah's gone. Kyrie Irving's there. On paper, huge upgrade. Kyrie Irving, for whatever is going on between Kyrie's left and right ears, one of the most amazing basketball players on the planet. No one should ever overlook that fact. So things have already changed. He's already gone from being, more of a scorer to now you're going to play a little bit less of a role because you've got a better player next to you. I should have taken a step back. The Celtics obviously also drafted Jason Tatum. Okay, so they come to training camp, they play the first game, and Gordon, hideous injury, out for the year. During that time, Jason Tatum steps in, and I think the Celtics knew Jason Tatum would be good. But if the Celtics knew Jason Tatum was going to be that good that soon, do you spend the money to bring in a Gordon Hayward? Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense. You would have spent that money to clean up a greater need. I think he was put in a strange position, and it never quite fit. And I think it had to rankle him that he's here playing the right way, being a ball mover, and he might have led the league in unrewarded cuts, because you saw definitely earlier in the year how much the Celtics missed just the way he played the game. And, it was a hard situation for him. I don't begrudge him making the move. He wasn't going to get the kind of contract in Boston that he got there.
Yeah, interesting. Bringing it back to the current Celtics team, criticism of Brad Stevens, it's a really divisive topic among fans. Do you think he's deserved of some of the criticism that he's been getting at all for this season?
I'm not there at all, really. I mean, earlier in the year, I thought, well, maybe it's not a bad idea to see Aaron Nesmith more. Because you look back at Miami, they bring in, Tyler Herro and I'm blanking on the guy's
Robinson.
name. Yeah.
Duncan Robinson.
Yeah. And so these are guys, they gave him the ball, let him shoot, and you saw the reward they got from it. And clearly Aaron Nesmith is, you look at his mechanics, it's just, the guy's a shooter. And what we're seeing now is he's also a hustler, which is really important to getting on the court. So that part there, I kind of wondered about at times. But the larger issue vis-a-vis Brad is if you've got a coach that knows what he's doing, that knows how to put guys in the right position, that knows how to look at his talent and give them a plan that works not only for the team, but also highlights their abilities as well. And then you have players who see this, who when they do it, get great results, again, not only for the team, but for themselves. And then they still don't do it consistently. Should you be looking at the coach or should you be looking at the players? And,
sure.
And part of that, again, it doesn't mean they're bad people. Sometimes it's just a matter of maturity and being around the block and, getting used to stuff.
So this iteration of the team is like much more talented on paper than, say, the 2017 team. And yet Brad Stevens had the 2017 team humming along perfectly on the court, ball movement, cuts, all those things that, you describe about a functionally sound basketball team. What is it about the personnel on this team where it's just not sticking with Brad Stevens for most of the time?
Well, I think you get guys that have the ability, I'm Jason Tatum, or I'm Jaylen Brown, I can make a play here. I can break down my defender and make this play. Yeah, and you can hit a tough shot. Good, but it's better. You're better off moving the ball and just catching it without a dribble and finishing. Your life is easier. The team shoots a higher percentage, all those things. But, guys, I remember talking to Paul Pierce about this a long time ago. And he said for the first bunch of years, guys want to establish themselves. And it's not always like a conscious thing. It's like a subconscious. They want to prove, hey, I'm this, I'm an all-star, I'm all these things. And again, I don't mean to crack on a Jason Tatum or a Jaylen Brown or anybody. It's human nature to want to, if you're a good person, to want to take responsibility and go do something. But it's hard to get that collective mentality. And especially when you've got a lineup that's changing all the time because of guys coming in and out with injuries. I mean, I think it's fair to assume that the Celtics would be much further along if Kemba Walker had been not only there from the start of the year, but ready. Because even after he came back, he wasn't making the kind of moves that Kemba Walker can make because he had that concern, like, if I do this, will I injure something? And you have to, so not only do you have to get back on the floor, and then secondly, get your wind and get your conditioning, but you've got to cross that intellectual, the mental threshold as well to say, okay, I can do this and without hesitating, because basketball, conscious thought basketball, you're dead. It's got to be instinctive. And, so if he'd have been there to start, things are better, all these things. So that's kind of feeds into where they can go, but also the problems that we've seen.
Just a wee bit of devil's advocate. Now, this is actually genuine pushback. It's not devil's advocate stuff. But there's two areas that the Celtics have really struggled with in my memory under Stevens. One is defensive rebounding. We've never been a good defensive rebounding team with them. I suspect that's possibly a schematic thing, and there's some payoff for it. But the one other thing is that we're notoriously poor at drawing free throws. And when I'm watching our team, I'm just like, guys, we need pressure on the basket. It just feels like we never get pressure on the basket. And with one group of players, sure, that's easy to pin on, that particular group of players. But when it's across a reasonable sample size of, this is season number 8, isn't it? So I'm like, is there something schematic offensively that discourages players from putting pressure on the rim, or it just doesn't seem to be to me. I'm just like, why isn't it there? We've had I think with Isaiah Thomas, we're pretty good at it, but I mean, it just doesn't seem to be pressure on the hoop so often to me. And I'm just like, to what extent is that a shortcoming of scheme or coach?
He's he's not telling them not to drive. Sorry for the double negative. I apologize.
Yeah.
I mean, and you saw what happened in that stretch where they had spread the floor and Jason Tatum was really driving to the basket a lot. That's another thing that a few years ago, I remember having a conversation with Paul Pierce and him saying, look, Tatum needs to be getting to the free throw line a lot more, which means getting to the basket a lot more. And Jason came back this year stronger. He had his COVID issue as well. And maybe that, played into it. I guess he's using an inhaler before games. So it's hard to know how much of that factors in. But clearly the idea that what the Celtics offense is designed to do, and what you see, a couple things. First of all, get up the floor fast. Not sure how familiar you guys are with American baseball, but Brad Stevens, a lot of games, looks like a third base coach trying to wave a guy in, trying to score from first on a single. And he's, get up the floor. So that would help things. But yeah, exactly.
Windmill.
The Red Sox had a third base coach named Wendell Kim. They used to call him Windmill Wendell. But that's part of the plan. And the idea is not just to get to the basket, to get to the rim and make shots or get fouled. That's priority one. But the secondary part of that is get into the paint, draw defense, have your wings, have you guys holding their corners and move the ball out. I mean, how many times have you seen, well, it happens with the Celtics some, and it happens with teams like Utah infinitely more. A guy will get into the paint, draw the defense, ball goes to the corner. If it's not a wide open shot, it gets moved out to the wing. That's not only successful basketball, that's beautiful basketball to watch.
Oh, absolutely. Tell me about it. I mean, look, sorry, I'm on a bit of a rant on this stuff because it's just driving me nuts, Steve. Help me out. Help me out here, Steve.
Well, fortunately, you don't live far from nuts, so you save money on gas, so that's good.
But, there's this thing that I've noticed, and it's lazy threes just don't go in at the same rate. Even if they're not that contested. Lazy threes just don't go in. It's like when you earn the three, that's when it goes in, and it's on the back of a stop, or it's on the back of penetration and a kick out. I mean, there's a pretty obvious reason. It's a lot easier to shoot a ball when the pass comes straight towards you as opposed to from the side. But it's just man, it drives me nuts the amount of lazy threes we take. We can get that anytime, Steve. Anytime. Anytime. Why,
Joe's a tortured soul.
Do we charge him for this counseling session, or should he be lying on a couch right now? I mean,
yeah, we often have episodes titled "Fan Therapy," and mostly they're for Joe, not for the listeners.
It's absolutely true. I mean, when you can catch and shoot at the 3-point arc, squared up, life is good. And it's another benefit of ball movement, getting touches to go around. It is hard for a guy like Shemi Ojale to be in the corner doing his job, doesn't see the ball for 4 or 5 possessions, and it gets sent out to him with a few seconds left on the shot clock. It's like, he's not in rhythm. He doesn't get his touches. And I think actually that kind of thing starts on the defensive end, because when you pressure the ball defensively, when you can get a turnover, get easy baskets, I think that the Celtics' percentage of easy baskets has got to be certainly in the lower half of the league, it would seem, just from a non-analytic eye test. It certainly looks that way. But to get to your point about defensive rebounding, every defense in the league is designed to help when a guy gets a step on somebody. And that, and the Celtics also, have never had big beasts. Aaron Baines, who was born in New Zealand.
Correct.
Correct. And then disavowed it.
Rightfully so. He made the right decision.
Wow.
That's why we shipped his ass to Phoenix.
So you two guys, ding. Let's but that's and even Aaron as beefy as he is, wasn't huge with the moving feet thing. And, when you're playing against centers like Joel Embiid, who's going to step outside and shoot over you if you don't come out, that's a necessity too. I mean, I loved Aaron's defensive philosophy, which to me was, you may score, but it's going to hurt. So that part there, I think that, to get to your point more directly, I think the Celtics are, first of all, they need to be on the ball, being into the ball more. And I think that they're too quick to help. I think, guard your yard, stay with your man, keep him, you got him, deal with him. Then if he gets a step, of course you need help at that point. But I think that they're almost too quick to give help, which puts you in rotation, which means that, a shot goes up and, the offensive rebound is there for the other club.
Yeah, often.
But I don't think that's a schematic thing directly. I think that's, guys not being into the ball as much as they need to be on defense at the start.
Right.
Shifting a little bit. So obviously it's been a really frustrating season, and one pillar of hope is the all-star duo, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Steve, you've been covering the team for over 35 years. In your time with the team, you've seen a number of superstars and all-star duos. How does the buzz around Tatum and Brown from those, among the team and close to the team, compared to duos prior, such as Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker?
Well, I think this duo, as a duo combined, is better. But buzz can be a relative thing. Sure. There was big buzz around Pierce and Antoine Walker, mainly because you were coming from an era where the Celtics had stunk for a bunch of years. So just any kind of glimmer of hope, there was a lot on that. But now I think, there's been more expected of the Celtics coming into this. And to a lot of people, Jaylen Brown's development into one of those, a duo guy, catches some people off guard, or has caught some people off guard the last couple of years. So, I think these guys certainly stack up well. But in terms of buzz, you're not going to get buzz around here until you win, and win consistently, because, whereas a number of cities around the league, it's, hey, the team we follow got to the playoffs and they even made it to the second round. Around here, that's basically considered failure.
Sure. Interesting.
You're playing under, your home games are being played under 17 pieces of laundry that kind of stare down at you. And, so expectation comes from fabric above.
Yeah. I also, the most fun that you tend to have, right? Like that, I imagine there was a real buzz around IT, when he was tearing it up. And it's also a function of how you're performing relative to actual expectations. Like the actual expectations of that team were exceeded every single year, all 3 years, and Tatum and Brown, perhaps it says something that they have the burden of expectation, right? Maybe that's a sort of, it signifies the buzz that would be there.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry,
Steve. Go ahead.
No, I think the IT thing was a kind of a lightning bolt, and I think he doesn't. I mean, the fact that the Celtics haven't got over the hump and gotten into the finals the last couple of years has taken away from it. But there are a lot of teams in the league that would have loved to be in the Celtics position the last few years. This year, it's been weird. And again, I think this is largely, as much as you can rightfully be driven to distraction by how things go on the floor, this is largely going to be looked at as kind of an asterisk kind of year, for a lot of reasons, valid ones. But I think Isaiah deserves a lot of credit for making the Celtics, from taking them from being a Siberia kind of team to becoming a place where free agents would want to come, a team that was viewed as on the rise and a place where you can go and be successful. And, as Kevin Garnett didn't want to be traded to the Celtics initially. And now that once he came here and saw and experienced what it's like to play on a franchise with this much history and to have the former players be around and to be a part of that, he's said it was probably the best basketball experience of his life. And, even a guy like Walton, Bill Walton, similar thing. Although he wanted to be here originally and beyond. So.
Do you think that point still resonates with the players on the team, particularly the all-star players like Tatum and Brown? Because something that stresses out a lot of fans of the team, I think, is, obviously there's a lot of player movement from one team to another in this era of basketball. Do you think that point of it's important to be a Celtic, it's significant for my career that I'm a Celtic, does that ring true within players' minds today?
I think it does, to the extent of when things are going well, when there's success. But I think it was similar always. Players who came to the Celtics when Bailey Howell came to the Celtics a billion years ago, was he all excited to be a Celtic? He was excited to get to a place where he could play. And Don Nelson was kind of a cast off, comes here, is part of very good teams, championship teams. And then then you develop you develop that kind of brotherhood by going through things together and having success together, and so, guys feel that Celtic thing when they're part of it and when they're in the battle, which a word I hesitate to use because it's derived from far more important things. But, something as simple as when the Celtics were kind of getting beat a few years ago by Miami, and the crowd, in the waning moments of the game, they're getting whacked, starts chanting, "Let's go Celtics." That stuck with a lot of those guys. But, when they get off the floor, when they get away from their team for a while, when the season's over and a couple of weeks later, it's business. And any player who doesn't look at it as a business, is hurting himself. And you can't do that in this kind of thing. It's you've got to take care of what you can.
It kind of makes me sad a little bit. I'm not surprised to hear it, but coming from down here, I don't know if the American. I'm going to have another little theory here. I don't know if this quite maps onto the American psyche as well.
Hold on, let me get my tinfoil hat and be ready.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, the listeners to the pod won't hear this, but Stephen, in an attempt to wind Ben up, he held up an All Blacks jersey at the start of this podcast.
I'm still rattled, actually.
He's still rattled. But down here, right, there's this concept of representative sports that doesn't really, I've never seen an equivalent of it in the States. For instance, here, when we're playing little kids basketball, even you might play for your town, and then you might, in my case, you might go up to your province. I never play for my province. In Ben's case, it'd be your state, and then you represent your country. There's that sort of pyramid of representation. You go and you have an awful lot of pride. So when you hold up that jersey, that represents a people group, and the players who wear that jersey are of that group of people and are representing that group of people. In our minds down here, it's kind of that's what it's about. So it's easy for us to imagine things like having pride in the jersey. That's like a kind of a little kind of trope that we would trot out down here. It's more easy for us to imagine pride in representing the city of Boston than I imagine it is for particularly for an athlete in America, because they haven't grown up actually representing things, right? They might make a USA basketball team, but there's no Georgia State age group team, right? They play AAU.
Well, there's your high school team, there's your college team, but a lot of these guys are in college for a year. A lot of the stars, certainly. I think there is that when you're in the middle of it. certainly you could not have watched the Red Sox in the summer when there was the marathon bombing, and watched that, and then they win the championship, and they had the Boston 617, their area code, the jerseys would hang in the dugout, and during the parade, the parade crossed the marathon finish line, and the parade stopped. Players came out and took championship trophies and hung the jerseys over them. And I think they sang "God Bless America," whatever. I forget whether it was the anthem or that, but there was a sense that team, they're part of the city, and certainly part of the fabric of the city that year. But, and this is what I'll fight back on your point, is when you're a player and you can feel this way, but and you can be fighting for the Celtics and saying, I want to be a Celtic, and I'm going to get a shamrock tattooed on me, all this stuff. And then the trade deadline comes in February and they trade your ass. So, what Isaiah Thomas gave up for the Celtics playing through that hip injury was, amazing. But when the season was over and they had a chance to get Kyrie Irving, gone. So should the players, I think it'd be wrong to expect that the players should feel that way. I think they do in a lot of cases when they're in the middle of it. But in terms of it's hard to feel that way when you know that if they can get someone better than you tomorrow, you're gone. And so your loyalty to them it's never going to be able to be matched. It's never going to be matched, and it shouldn't be matched because the team is there to win for the team, for the entity. So it's hard for players when they're just pieces of that.
Yeah,
huge pieces sometimes, but
it's totally fair enough. It's just really interesting. Like, you can't be traded from the All Blacks, for example. You can't sign with the All Blacks. You can't be traded from them.
So you're comparing, comparing oranges and All Blacks.
Exactly. All that to say, there's this, I think, and there's this part of the mystique around the Celtics that you are kind of following this long line of tradition, which is, the I guess the language around it is more akin to what I would see with the All Blacks, and that you're following this long line of people. Like they'll do these things where they do team photos, and like the team photo shows like every All Black ever, like the team of 5 million. And there's a sort of, maybe we have this kind of unspoken expectation of our players that it would be like that. And from our cultural context, it almost makes more sense because that's how we kind of understand sport, right? Like we do have professional teams, but ultimately the national team, that's what we actually care about for all our sports. That's the peak of the season. That's the peak of the whole thing. And it's almost like we probably want it both ways, right? We want these players' undying loyalty, and we also want to be able to cut them if they're not working out. But I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that there's somewhat of an incoherence in the expectation around, of players to be like that, given the reasons that you just say.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, in terms of, like you said, you can't get traded from the All Blacks. I think I'll go out on a limb, but I'm going to make this bold statement. I don't think you're going to see United States, their basketball team, trade LeBron James to Canada. I don't think that's going to happen. Okay. So, it's, again, you're talking about two different things here. And the guys that do the Olympic situation, they're into it. They always have been. And even as professionals have gotten into it, you'll see some guys miss the Olympics. Maybe they're injured and maybe they have to protect, their opportunity, their limited opportunity to make a living that happens in a rare case where a guy might miss an Olympics for certain reasons. But, I think there's that feeling there. But it's brief here. It's brief because I would probably hazard a guess that professional sports in the States are a little more glorified and certainly financially a lot more lucrative than they are in other parts of the world. I mean, I guess the opposite way to look at it would be football, or American soccer in Europe, what that looks like there relative to what it looks like in the United States. The greater import there versus here.
Interesting. Now, there is a game about to start, so we do have to wrap this up pretty quickly. Before we go, though, Steve, we've just got a few very quick questions to get to from the Celtics Reddit community. Just going to rattle these off very quickly. So the first one is from a user called Burner for Design, and they ask, how do players feel about the dumping of Daniel Tice, and does it in any way compare to the Kendrick Perkins trade in terms of how it's perceived by the team?
No. The Tice move, they weren't going to be able to re-sign him this summer. He was going to be able to get more elsewhere. They knew that, but that deal was also made because the Celtics realized it was time that Rob Williams needed those minutes. So that's why that was made. The Kendrick Perkins thing was, that deal was made with a similar vein, that they weren't going to pay Kendrick Perkins what he might get in the open market. And it's funny how the players have talked about that afterwards, but there were players that, as good as Perkins was for this team, there were players who passed him the ball that weren't exactly excited about his hands. But so I don't think the Tice thing was. Look, I think Tice, if the Celtics had done better, I think we'd be looking at Tice differently. It's not his fault. I admire the hell out of the guy. As you see a lot of guys where someone large will be coming in for a dunk and they want to get the hell out of Dodge because they don't want to be on the poster. Daniel Tice always stuck his nose in there, never backed off of those situations. And in today's world, I think that's something that you really have to admire in a guy.
It drove me crazy. It felt like a little bit of a mini curse of IT sort of thing. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole that we may not have time to go down.
So does your car, is the GPS in your car already programmed for crazy? Because you're talking about driving you crazy a lot tonight.
Yeah. It would appear so.
That's what this season has done.
Doesn't make you a bad person.
We got a question from user Larbird33, co-host of the show. Unfortunately, not here tonight. He says, you should ask him if he remembers any deals that were close to happening but fell through. Maybe he reported on all of them, but I imagine there's a couple he might have sat on. Any tidbits for the audience?
Yeah, there was a huge one years ago, and it resonates today, and you'll know why. The Celtics I'm trying to think of the exact years. It was the late 80s, but Dallas really wanted Kevin McHale. And they were going to be giving up Detlef Schrempf, Sam Perkins, and a pick. And the Celtics would have had to include more to make the trade, make the numbers work. But it was going to that was a deal that was there. And from the Celtics standpoint, also, it was after McHale had played on the broken foot in the 87 playoffs. So he was, although he was certainly a very good player after that, it wasn't the same. The Celtics dynamic had changed because prior to that, McHale, when they played, for example, Atlanta, McHale would guard Dominique. Parrish would guard Kevin Willis. Larry could guard Tree Rollins, who wasn't getting the basketball. So, all of a sudden when Larry has to guard Dominique, that's when you get that Dominique-Larry shootout in the playoffs the next year, I believe. So, so that deal was something that was huge. Red stepped in, didn't want it to happen. And the Celtics had already started their slide by then. Larry had been playing hurt a lot. And when I say it resonates today, Danny Ainge was in the middle of that. He saw all that happening. He and I talked about it at the time. He was a player here. So that's why you saw Danny make the deal with Brooklyn for Pierce and Garnett. Whereas using the Celtic mentality of the late 80s, they would have kept those guys and driven them until the wheels fell off. So again, so something like that was a huge one that really could, Schrempf and Perkins were still on the ascending at that point. So if the Celtics had made that deal, it might have squeezed a few more contending years out of them.
Yeah, that is a juicy one. I'm glad we asked that question. It seems weird to now pivot from talking about Larry Bird and Kevin McHale to asking about Payton Pritchard, but that's the next question. The Shark from Nemo asks, what does he see as Payton Pritchard's ceiling? When first drafted, he was compared to TJ McConnell and a poor man's Fred VanVleet. Where does his ceiling sit now that we're 3/4 of the way through his rookie season?
Well, the TJ thing, as much as I like him as a player, Payton's much more of a shooter. His work ethic, before the game and things it's incredible. The sweat he gets in an hour or two before a game. And the reason why you saw him playing early was it kind of harkens back to a point we were discussing earlier in this conversation. Brad likes him because he pushes the ball up the floor. So, that's a big part. So I think he's going to be, he's very good now. I think he's a guy that can be a large contributor to a contending team. And I think he's going to get better as he learns the nuances more, NBA spacing and things like that. But he also does something that other Celtics need to do more, which is defensively move your feet and get into guys. Maybe he looks like he's moving faster and harder because he's smaller, so his legs aren't as
a little harder,
moving as larger distances. But I'm a Payton Pritchard guy. I liked him when he was in college, and you always wonder how that's going to translate for guards. But he came here and saw things, and then realized how hard he had to work, redouble his efforts. So. And I'll toss out one more thing here. And it's something if there are younger people that might listen to this podcast, I think it's something that's really instructive. When I've spoken to teams, when I spoke to my college team, University of Dayton, a couple of years ago, I tell this story. A few years ago, the Warriors came through Boston, and they played the night before in Washington. They had an off-day practice. So I had to go to their practice to do a column on Steph Curry. And our colleges are in the same league, so we have a running $5 bet whenever the teams play. I've told him that he's my retirement plan. But so practice gets over. We talk to the coaches, a few other people, and then Steph's still out on the court with an assistant coach, and he's taking 3-pointers, 5, 5, 5, 5, and 5 around the key, back and forth. He finishes. I speak to him. We get a few laughs and thanks for the time. Good to see you. Thanks. He's walking away. I said, Steph, one more thing. How many shots do you get up after practice? So 250.
Wow.
Okay. It's not like Steph Curry forgot how to shoot on the flight from DC to Boston. It's a very short flight. It's hard to forget much in that short period of time. So this is a guy that's one of the greatest shooters the game's ever known. And he thinks he still has to do this. So if you're a player, if you're a young player, what do you have to do? And that's the kind of thing that once you do that, and Larry Bird was the same way. My theory, I don't mean to taught on our New Zealand friends, theory thing, but mine is that guys don't make shots at the end of games just because they're talented. They make the shots in the games because they've put the work in. And their mentality is, hey, I've earned the right to make this shot. And they have that as an emotional base when they go up to shoot. So, I think that a guy like Payton Pritchard, what he does pregame, that factors into that a lot. And, if people are out there aren't learning from what a Steph Curry is doing and how he's changing the game and how at a guy his size, he's playing in a game of giants and having that huge an impact, it's a lesson well learned and one that you'll regret if you don't heed it.
Yeah, that's great. It's always great to hear a positive report.
Yeah, absolutely.
About someone. Steve, final question from user No Scroats McFly. The one big thing that you've been really right on about the Celtics, and one big thing that you've been really wrong on.
Oh, I don't know. I always look at what's the next thing. So I don't, I'm not sure. I mean, I what I was wrong on, that sushi in Sacramento that time, I think that was a huge mistake. Maybe it's just, I'm sure there's something. I wish it'd given me more time because I'll probably think of 10 things, but pressed on it in the moment. I was wrong about Jawan Johnson. I thought he was going to be a player. I was wrong about, I don't know, probably more stuff than we have the time for. Even if we had infinite time, we still wouldn't have enough probably. But I wish I could think of a real doozy here.
Well, I'll help to fill in the blanks for you, Steve.
Please.
So, and this will be, I guess, my final comment. So when my experience with the Celtics, I started following them after Rick Pitino got fired and they made a run for the 01 playoffs. They didn't make it, but they got really close, and I've been locked in ever since. And in that period of time through the 2000s, we still didn't really have access to like League Pass and stuff like that. And so my way of experiencing it was really ultimately via your columns and from some of your colleagues over at the Globe. What always stuck out to me is I always felt like you gave Ainge a really fair shake. There were some other media members who I felt like didn't at the time, and I might be overstating your case there, but I always felt like you gave him a real fair shake, and if you were, in my memory, you're very right about that. He's been a very, very fruitful contributor to the Celtics, and for me, it's just really special to be able to talk to you because so much of my Celtics experience was mediated through your words. I can still remember your sign-off, Steve. There's nobody wins unless everybody wins.
Yes. Well, thank you. I will say that that's like, well, thank you, number one. Number two, that's, to me, really important to know who you're working for. I mean, sure, you've got bosses at your newspaper, but you're there to serve the people that are taking their time to read you. And I always thought that, and you see some people, most people do, but some people who just put stuff out there. I go back to my University of Dayton and teach for a week every year, and I always say that, like, when you're a columnist or you're on a talk show as a talk show host, you have the right to give your opinion. They request that you give your opinion, but you owe it to your readers, your listeners, that your opinion be based on a true story. So, that means just putting in the work. I think Ainge might argue with you about giving him a fair shake all the time. But, certainly anything that comes up with the Celtics or the team you cover, you owe it to your readers to talk to everyone involved intimately that you can to get the whole story. So, Ainge was pretty sure that if something comes up that's negative about the team, he's going to get a phone call. Is there something that you think is incorrect here, or do you want to have your say in this? But I'm sure he didn't like it when, I spoke to a number of GMs throughout the league who weren't so much appreciative of the way Danny dealt with things. I mean, the same reason that fans were teed off at Ainge for years about just the way he would act on the floor. That's, he's that kind of kid. He's kind of bratish that way. But it made him a competitive player. It made him a competitive GM. And relative to the league, he's been successful. Definitely call out his mistakes, but, look at the situation relatively.
Interesting. Look, I think that's a really good place to wrap it up. And just to echo Joe's sentiments there, Steve, like it is an absolute pleasure having you on. Prior to League Pass, prior to access to the NBA in our part of the world, a lot of that NBA was experienced through yourself and your colleagues there as well. So it really is a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time. The Celtics are currently losing to the Spurs, so that's something we've got to get to. And Steve is currently taunting me. This is great radio. Taunting me holding up an All Blacks jersey, just for all the people listening.
Have you guys had Nick Kyrgios on?
Not yet. No, we're working towards it, but hopefully at some point we'll get him on board. And look, Steve, we're going to have to send you some Australian merchandise, mate, because something to brighten up your home there, because that New Zealand merch it's a little dark, a little dreary.
I'll go nice in the fireplace through those cold winters.
We've got an ocean out the window. We're good here.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, Steve Bulpett, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on. Thanks again.
Guys, be well, okay?
All right, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks again to Steve Bulpett for coming on the show. Thanks to Joe, our New Zealand correspondent, and thanks to you for tuning in. We'll be back a little later in the week. Until then, go Celtics. Peace.